hypothyroidism, as we studied, as we all have seen this chart before, that in hypothyroidism, there is increase in the TSH level and decrease in free T3, T4 level during pregnancy. It occurs in 1% of the pregnant women, usually due to autoimmune Hashimoto's thyroiditis, can occur following treatment of hyperthyroidism that can progress to mixed edema and coma. Subclinical hypothyroidism with elevated TSH, normal free thyroid index is in asymptomatic patient. It is associated with other autoimmune disorders like patients can have type 1 diabetes, 5 to 8% risk of patients with type 1 diabetes. They are having 5 to 8% risk of hypothyroidism, and 25% postpartum thyroid dysfunctions are associated. Symptoms are fatigue, constipation, cold intolerance, muscle cramps, hair loss, dry skin, slow reflexes, weight gain, intellectual slowness, voice changes, insomnia, and carpal tunnel syndrome. The fetal and neonatal effects are that there is higher incidence of low birth weight due to medically indicated preterm deliveries, preeclampsia, and abruption. Iodine deficient hypothyroidism leads to congenital cretinism, which leads to growth failure, mental retardation, and neuropsychological deficit. There is reduced IQ in babies of the women with the profound hypothyroidism. The causes of the hypothyroidism can be either autoimmune, that is Hashimoto's thyroiditis, subacute thyroiditis, thyroidectomy, radioactive iodine treatment, or iodine deficiency in the woman. That is the most common worldwide cause. That is the reason the iodized supplementation was, iodine supplementation of the salt was started to reduce the risk of hypothyroidism worldwide. Treatment of hypothyroidism is that preconception optimization is mandatory, as mostly insult occurs during first trimester, and if there is hypothyroidism, these women are again treated with the levothyroxine in sufficient doses. We repeat the thyroid TSH levels after every 4 weeks and adjust the dose accordingly. In conclusion, that the thyroid disease in pregnancy is the most common pre-existing disorder in pregnancy. Continuation of same medication in pregnancy is advisable. Mode of delivery is according to the obstetric indication. Hyper or hypothyroidism will not affect the mode of delivery, intrapartum management, or postnatal management because of this particular disease. Epidural analgesia is again not indicated, and breastfeeding is also allowed along with the medical treatment. Now, the second disorder is asthma in pregnancy. Asthma is a common respiratory disorder that is affecting the women of the childbearing age. Chronic inflammatory, it is basically the chronic inflammatory disease of the airway, and it manifests as the hyper response to wide variety of stimuli. As we all know that asthma is basically asthma flares, or it precipitates whenever there is some precipitating factor like allergens, upper respiratory tract infection. Some people are allergic to some medications like aspirin, beta blockers, environment pollutants, exercise, cold air, emotional stress. The condition is more common in atopic or the allergic individuals. And incidence of asthma in pregnancy is 1 to 4%. Generally, 33% of the patients with asthma, they remain unchanged during pregnancy. 28% improve, patients with the asthma, they improve during pregnancy, and 35% worsens. Asthma is in no way be considered as a contraindication to pregnancy. The only thing is that the disease should be properly treated before the patient enters in the pregnancy to avoid any problems during pregnancy. And if the patient is taking any medication, any inhaler, medications, or steroid, we can continue during pregnancy. The most common reason that asthma symptoms deteriorate in patients reducing their treatment because of a belief that medication may be harmful. This is the most common myth in most of our patients, that the medications they cause problems during pregnancy. So most of the patients they stop taking their medications. These patients they require a thorough counseling that whatever medication they are taking should continue, and we can just follow for any side effects or any teratogenic effect of the drugs. All commonly used drugs to control asthma are safe in pregnancy, so we can confidently continue with the medications. All patients must be reassured that any flare of asthma must not be ignored, because still there is high mortality associated with the acute asthma during pregnancy. So, treatment with medications such as steroid is safe both for mother and fetus. With regard to the effects of asthma on fetal outcome, there is no evidence that there is any significant impact on the fetal growth or outcome due to asthma. Maternal and fetal risk that asthma may worsen in pregnancy due to other treatable conditions, like if the patient is having gastroesophageal reflux disease or she is having pregnancy rhinitis. These problems can precipitate the asthma. Any patient whose asthma seems to be deteriorating during third trimester should be seen by the physician, and the appropriate control of asthma should be done before she enters in the labor. So, the pregnancy counseling should be based on preceding information. Overall, it should be anticipated that pregnancy will be well tolerated. Education about proper use of medications and inhalers, and not to stop the medications during pregnancy is the mandatory part. Prenatal, ideally, asthma should be optimized before conception. Close monitoring and dose adjustment is essential. During labor, the asthma exacerbation in labor due to natural release of endogenous steroids and epinephrine. Uh, Generally, the exacerbation of the asthma during labor is rare because of the natural release of the steroids and epinephrine, because of the stress of delivery. Again, the intrapartum management is not different from a normal patient. We can safely use prostaglandins, we can safely use oxytocin, and PGF2 alpha and ergometrine should not be used because these lead to bronchospasm. This is the important component. Then, similarly, the postnatally breastfeeding is not contraindicated if the patient is optimally managed, and if she is taking any medication, we can continue and we can start the baby on the breastfeeding. The differential, like if the patient is if there is suspicion of exacerbation of asthma and labor, the other differential should also be considered. For example, pulmonary edema, it can be because of the cardiac cause or non-cardiac cause, such as preeclampsia, tocolysis or sepsis, pulmonary embolism or aspiration. And attacks of asthma during labor can be managed with the conventional treatment whatever she is taking previously. And those women who are taking some steroids for more than 2 weeks time period, they should be given a stress dose of steroid during labor, that is 10 milligrams hydrocortisone 1 bg for 3 days. And this stress dose of steroid is required for all women who are taking steroids for any reason during pregnancy for more than 2 weeks. So management options are that if the operative delivery is required, epidural analgesia is preferable than general anesthesia. If general anesthesia is required, the anesthetic care is same as the patient was not pregnant. Patient with severe asthma should be delivered in the centers where appropriate backup facility and medical expertise are available. Acute asthma is still a cause of maternal death and must be taken extremely seriously. So, again, the main crux or the main take home message is that multidisciplinary approach is required. So, these patients they should be delivered in a tertiary care setup where the backup ICU facilities or the pulmonologist are available. Postnatally, the patient should continue their medications. Breastfeeding is not contraindicated even if the patient is on steroids. The breastfeeding rather reduces the risk of atopy by 30 to 50% if the if the newborn is exclusively breastfed for 6 to 12 months. Risk of child developing asthma in later life varies between 6 to 30% depending on whether only mother or both mother and father are atopic. Conclusion is that asthma should not be considered as a contraindication to pregnancy. Advice is to continue the treatment during pregnancy. Optimal control of asthma is essential prior to the onset of labor. Routine medications have no adverse effects on fetus. Exacerbation is rare in labor. Prostaglandin E2 and oxytocin can be used safely. PG2 and PGF2 alpha and ergometrine should not be used because they causes bronchospasm. Labor should be covered with hydrocortisone if mother is taking steroids for more than 2 weeks. Epidural analgesia is preferred, and breastfeeding is not contraindicated even if mother is on prednisolone. Now, coming to the third disorder, that is the epilepsy during pregnancy. Again, in epilepsy, the main thing is that whatever the medication the patient is taking before entering in the pregnancy should be continued during pregnancy, even if all the anti-epileptic drugs they have side effects, and these side effects should be explained to the female, and they should be looked for during in the anomaly scan and should be covered. But there is no recommendation to change the medication. We can only adjust the dosage of the drugs. We will discuss later on. 0.5% of the women of childbearing age have this commonest chronic neurological disorder that can complicate the pregnancy. The classification of epilepsy or seizures is same as in the other non-pregnant patients, like primary generalized epilepsy that includes the tonic-clonic seizures. Absent seizures are myoclonic jerks. Partial or focal seizures with or without loss of consciousness are secondary generalization. Are temporal lobe seizures. Pathogenesis is that idiopathic and no underlying cause is found. 30% of the females they have family history of epilepsy, previous surgery to the cerebral hemisphere, intracranial mass lesions like meningiomas or the AV malformations they enlarge during pregnancy. Are most commonly pregnancy associated cause is the antiphospholipid syndrome, in which the patient can present with the seizures